Welcome to the stage, Mike Zakarian.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back. We get a good one. Listen, I was like, this is all business this morning. I wasn't going to interact with the chat at all. And then our man, Copa the Corgi, says, good morning from Australia on that new dad night shift. Congratulations, man. That's very exciting. You're probably delirious right now, and I'm excited that you're taking in some YouTubes while you're, probably freaking out about being a dad. But congratulations. That's awesome. Excited everyone's here this morning. We got a good one. We got a fun one. I'm excited about it. You also don't have to just hear me talk for a straight hour, so that'll be good just for everybody's mental health. But a couple of things real quick. Just a reminder, the 89 Cavs are back tonight at 7 o'clock, so that'll be fun. Come back for that. And then no shows tomorrow, no shows on Monday because we're going out to, we're all going. We're going to Utah this weekend for a little Salt Lake City All-Star action, which Embiid just kind of hinted that he might not play. So that's kind of interesting. But yeah, so reminder, no shows. So we 7 o'clock tonight, nothing on Friday, nothing on Monday, and then we'll be back at it on Tuesday. Other business, like the stream, subscribe. All of the links to everything that we're doing today, the people we're talking to, the stuff that we do, everything's in the description, in the show notes, so you can go check that out. But enough of that crap. Excited for our guest today. Listen, I feel like I've been evangelizing about this podcast since I've heard it. And I think a lot of you have listened to it now. So excited to have the host of the Whistleblower pod, Tim Livingston, join us. How you doing, man?
I'm doing well, Mike. Thanks for having me. I was loving the green room music.
That was a rebrand that happened recently. So shout out our friend and Team Hold participant Veronica who put that together. A little like comedy club vibes, a little comedy club vibes meets YouTube.
Well done, Veronica.
Yeah, Veronica crushed it. Dude, so I was so excited. I mean, listen, when I first listened to the podcast, I was so excited. And I don't do this. I think I followed you and then DM'd you, and I was like, dude, thank you. Because I found it like a little later too. So it was like peak pandemic. I live in New York, and I was like, I just need something while I'm doing walks, because that's like the thing that you do during the pandemic. And found it. And I usually don't do that. DM'd was like, dude, thank you. This is great.
Appreciate that, man. Yeah, we're coming out with 2 bonus episodes that have been over 2 years in the making. And that's why I'm on here for all your audience. But yeah, I appreciate that. It was a labor of love. Everything in the podcast is true. It took me 8 years to get it off the ground. That relationship with Tim Donaghy and all the things that had to happen for that podcast to exist. So
that's that's kind of where I wanted to start. Was it just, a podcast comes out and people are like, wow, over the course of 2 months, I got an episode a week, and that was great. It probably took like a year. And you've talked about it a little bit, but even just thinking about like, this was sensitive information that people are usually not down to talk about, like on every side of it, right? Like if you are on the organizational side, you're probably not like, oh, I really want to have a conversation. If you're on the the guilty side or allegedly guilty side, you don't really want to have conversations about it. So like, what was that process like of just trying to get people to talk to you?
It's funny, I was on a call yesterday with 2 guys I'm working on another project with, and they were saying the same thing, like I can cuss on this, right?
Yeah,
I can drop an F-bomb. Like, how the fuck do you get these people to talk to you? I don't know. I think I'm really good at the cold email. But ultimately, and that's kind of where we go in these bonus episodes.
Yeah.
in season 1, I think if you listen to Whistleblower, then you should be convinced that Tim Donaghy was not the only crooked referee. And so that's the thread that I want to keep pulling at. And the bonus episodes, we get Jimmy Batista. So Batista was the third conspirator. He was the ringleader. He was the one who was working with Hugh, with the Gambinos and everybody else. And Jimmy's the one who blew it all up. Jimmy's great. His stories are amazing. He was in the sports betting world for 30 years before Donaghy. And so that, when you talk about getting people to talk, getting Jimmy has a motive to talk now. He's out of the world. He's been excommunicated. He's willing to go on the record. And again, that's part of the narrative in the first bonus episode. Getting him to talk is still hard. Because he's been burned so many times. But yeah, he gives us a lot of insight in these bonus episodes into the broader conspiracy. And but Mike, that's the challenge going forward. And that as a journalist and as a storyteller, it's where I'm struggling. How do I get these mobsters and sports, the Billy Walters of the world and guys like that to tell me their stories? What proverbial carrot is there to dangle? There's really not one. So going forward,
I would imagine you not bank on, but like outside of like the incorrect story getting out there. Like if someone, I can, like for Donaghy, if he's feeling like, why is this all falling on me? Like it's not just me. That's like their incentive to get out there, I'd imagine. Because I can't think of any other reason as to why you'd be like, here's the blueprint of what happened.
I mean, that's the thing with Donaghy. It was easy. I was like, he obviously ended up lying to us about stuff. And now he and we haven't talked since the podcast because he's very angry with me for calling him out on lies. What I did, and I've said this before, the first half of Whistleblower is the scandal. What was Tim Donaghy doing? Who was he working with? How much money was moving? Just the intricacies of the scandal. The second half of the podcast is the conspiracy. What were there any other refs, and what were they doing? What was David Stern doing? What was the government doing? And that for me has always been the most interesting part and what I want to continue to investigate. So Donaghy was pretty easy because at the end of the day, I could say very genuinely, like, I think there is more here. Tell me your story and help me unravel this.
And he's probably like, I imagine he's like, finally, someone wants to take my side instead, or at least hear my side of it, because it was all, I mean, like, I just remember consuming it as it came out. I was like, wow, what a scumbag, right? Because that's like the only side you were hearing. And then that was it. It kind of went away after that. And then even when he, like, whether he was doing an interview or something like that after the fact, you're like, okay, dude, like, but the narrative had already been set. And so as you were, I mean, like, I just remember in the Whistleblower podcast where you start talking about the call logs a little bit, and just like how many back and forths between Scott, who I know is mentioned in the in like the trailer of the next 2 episodes coming out. I was like, holy crap. Like, I, at no point, that to me, I was just like, okay, this is all conspiracies. I know the chat's even making fun of me, like we the people saying, but Mike doesn't believe anything is rigged. Because I was after the Super Bowl where everybody was like #rigged. This is an entertainment business, not so. I was making fun of them about that. But clearly, there's some truth in some of it.
Look, there's no systems. I'm looking at systems. The NBA refereeing system, and this goes for other major sports as well. There are no real boundaries, and there are really no checks and balances for the people that are in the system, right? So if you look at the Catholic Church, if you look at our American political system, these systems recruit, they recruit good people. And I don't want to discount the good people that are in these systems because they want fairness and they want good things and they have ethics and all that. But there are people that enter these systems for all the wrong reasons. And the systems encourage these people and protect these people.
Right.
And so if you look at the NBA refereeing system, what real checks and balances are in place to ensure that every single man and woman who is a NBA referee is refereeing each game with integrity? They don't exist.
Right.
And that is what I would love to see improve.
Yeah. I mean, I was listening to Ethan Strauss's podcast, The House of Strauss, this week, and they were talking a little bit about that because and I'm not going to get into the whole Brett Favre thing just in case I also get something in the mail from him. But they were just talking about how, like, it has more to do, like, when you see whether it's a state government or whatever type of government where it's all like one side, right? When you like control everything, like you said, those checks and balances sometimes are not, even if they exist, they're not implemented because there's nobody on the other side pushing back. And that's kind of like what we saw happen in Mississippi. And I think that's like a great point about the referees, right? If that system is not in place to hold people accountable and just to make sure things are going above board, then here we are. You don't have a podcast. I mean, you do have a podcast because of it.
Yeah, and good news, we're doing a little Brett Favre thing too. Patty Cotter, my team. Shout out to Patty. Is awesome. We're launching an Underdog Originals channel, and Patty, our first projects are going to be Reggie Bush, Brett Favre, and probably Zion Williamson is our third. But the Brett Favre stuff is fascinating, and so we do a deep dive, and we're doing it on YouTube too. So after you watch Mike's show, hop on over to Underdog Originals and check that out. We're coming out with that probably late March, early April.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. I one of the other things too I wanted to talk about, like, are you obviously when you're going into these conversations, you're trying to like clear your head and have an unbiased opinion. You're just like, I'm just taking in information and then we'll see where we go. But like for you personally, when you get like, how did your position on stuff evolve throughout this entire process, or did it, I guess?
It's a really good question. Yeah, you're as a journalist, you want to be unbiased, but as somebody who's watched the NBA for my entire life, it's really hard to not go in with a little bit of bias, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, look, you'll hear in the bonus episodes, these bonus episodes revolve around Scott Foster, and my exploration is to further investigate the relationship between Donaghy and Foster. And in the end, I think we come up with a really interesting conclusion. And I'm obviously trying to tantalize you as much as possible. They come out in a couple days on the 20th. So February 20th, these bonus episodes drop. I mean, look, ultimately what I'll say here for the first time is that I don't think Scott Foster was involved. I don't think that he was knowingly involved in the Donaghy scandal, in the NBA betting scandal. That being said, do I think that there isn't a problem that exists? Do I think that there weren't countless other referees in basketball? Especially, we have credible leads. I have credible leads with multiple referees, college, NBA. But going back to what we talked about at the beginning of this interview, how do I get to the finish line? How do I get all the way there and report on these in a way? Because I can't be wrong. I can't come out and say this referee is doing it unless I'm 100% sure. I'm not going to risk ruining anybody's life unless I'm 100% sure. And ultimately, you need to get the people that the referee was betting with. You need to get the people. There's a ton of work that goes into this, and it's just going to be really, really hard. And I know fans want the answers. And ultimately, trying to tantalize again, what I would say is that there's just a really big problem. And the problem still exists, and there's no everything that the NBA just wants it to go away. And I'm determined to make the NBA improve the system, and we'll see if I'm ever successful.
Yeah, just like acknowledge it and hold yourselves accountable. Like I think people are so afraid of being wrong, or admitting wrongdoing, and so that they go out of their way to whether ignore or hide or push down. We're like, there's plenty of things wrong with sports in general. I think people are still going to watch. You know what I mean? Like if you take an L and be like, wow, yeah, we have recognized that there's room for improvement, and then make the necessary change. I don't think anyone's being like, oh man, I can't believe I wasted my life. I'm not going to watch anymore. Like, it's just not how it works. So yeah, the one note about Scott too, the only reason I'm not a huge Scott Foster fan, but the only reason I was,
if there is one, Mike, please let me know. Any Scott Foster fans in the chat.
I also just love the idea of someone being like, yeah, dude, I'm a big referee guy, man. I love him. But the balls on him, if he was involved, to be like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to continue this job for another 20 years. Would have been incredible. But I mean, after listening to you talk to Tim Donaghy for as long as he did, I do think there are people with that type of ego that would be like, yeah, I'm never going to get caught, so I'm going to keep going.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. No, I'm excited to hear a little bit more about that. I had another question that I was excited to go
real quick on the Scott. While you think of that question on the Scott Foster, I'm not saying Scott Foster is a good guy.
Yeah.
Look, after Chris Paul retires, hopefully Chris comes out and talks a little bit more about that feud. I think from what I've heard, it's fascinating, and it's also indicative of a larger problem, right? Where okay, somebody like Scott Foster's not fixing games, but he kind of is. And Donaghy was betting and this is public, and this is what the Pedowitz report says, and this is what Donaghy says, and this is what everybody says, is that Donaghy was calling Foster all those times to glean information that he was using to bet on games. He did not do so successfully, but if you listen to what Donaghy says, and I went back and listened, and I've gotten a lot more information from Batista that has allowed me to view Donaghy's original Scott Foster comments in a new light. What Donaghy says is that he was trying to get information from Scott Foster on players. Okay, so what does that mean to me? That means that Scott Foster openly abhors certain players, and that information is what Tim Donaghy was trying to bet on. Now, to Scott's defense, Donaghy did not do so successfully over the course of the NBA betting scandal. But isn't that a problem? Where Tim Donaghy is calling Scott Foster all these times to specifically get information about players. And so if you look at Steve Javie and you look at Dick Bavetta and you look at all the refs that Tim Donaghy calls company men, that I think is a great term. And Rasheed Wallace has stamped that term. So if Rasheed signs off on company man, then I think we can all use it. And it obviously applies to all walks of life.
Yeah.
But if these men who are supposed to be officiating our games and doing so with no bias whatsoever, openly hate and openly dislike certain players on the court, it's a problem. I mean, Scott Foster, if you're a Suns fan and Scott Foster walks in the court and you're a bettor, right? We're all in the betting world now, in the fantasy betting world, Underdog Fantasy, shout out.
There you go.
So
promo code hold.
Love it. Yeah, I mean, it's still a huge issue. And
sorry.
You go.
No, I was just going to say, it's not worse, but it's almost worse that it's not that Scott was cheating with Tim or fixing with Tim, but Tim's just like, yes, Scott sucks as a ref. So what I'm going to do is just talk to him about like how he's bad at his job. And then I'm going to take that information to use that to bet, which is wild.
Wild. The Scott Foster stuff is wild.
Have you found, have players been open to talking with you, or have you found that they're still kind of a little closed-lipped about it? Cause I don't know if they feel like there's an upside to like disclosing that.
Look, the best one, I'm coming out on the Underdog Network. God, I'm just shouting out my employer left and right.
Go for it. And
no, I'm very passionate about Underdog. We'll get into that in a separate interview. But I'm coming out with an interview. The two that are most open are Rasheed Wallace and Bonzi Wells. And so I sat down with them for over 2 hours several months ago, and we talked about the Jailblazers, and that's going to be its own thing. But then we talked about refs for about an hour, and Rasheed and Bonzi are the two that talk about refs the most openly of the NBA guys that I've spoken with. Because to your point, and this is now a theme of the interview, what incentive does any current players can't talk about it. The system is that refs can do whatever the fuck they want on the court, and they don't have to answer to anybody.
Yeah.
And we get into this in these bonus episodes. The Pedowitz report calls out Scott Foster and says in the report that Scott Foster wants to talk to the media. It's 15 years later, Scott Foster's never said a fucking word to the media.
Yeah, why now?
So yeah, when do I get to ask Scott Foster a question?
Yeah.
When does any journalist get to ask any of these referees a question? When does the referee have to go and do a media session and talk to the press after a game? Why doesn't that happen? And why can't players get fined for saying a referee sucks? Well, we all watched the game. We've all seen the 2-minute report. The referee sucks.
I think
the referee sucks.
The 2-minute report, I think, is like one of the most laughable things that come out after two. Because there's just like, there's no point to it except for to be like, yeah, they did miss that call. But there's no like course of action that happens after. There's no like, yeah, if you were on the 2-minute report 5 times in 2 weeks, like maybe you got to take a month off or something like that. It's just this like weird, it's almost like one of those, I'm sorry. I'm not sorry for what I did, but I'm sorry that this happened. Apologies, right? Like there's no accountability or recourse for it.
I mean, look, what was Mark Davis was the referee a couple weeks ago. Are you a Celtics fan, Mike?
I am a Celtics fan.
So like, let's go back, cut this into a nice TikTok. But the referee a couple weeks ago in the Lakers Celtics game, and by the way, I thought LeBron traveled before that foul.
Yeah,
I mean, he took 3 steps, guys. Come on.
But it was a foul. Like if you're not going to call the travel,
just call the foul. Call something, and then he tees up Beverly for the camera incident, which was amazing. But look, I mean, it came out. So you're talking his record, the Celtics record when he refed, I think those 40 games was like what, 38. And the Celtics are a very good basketball team. They win a lot of games, but I think the Celtics were playing like they're winning 95 to 97% of their games. I forget the stat that he refereed, and his wife's Twitter, which was quickly deactivated, was them in Celtics jerseys. Come on.
I know. That's tough. Like, that was such a tough look. And it's so funny because you can occasionally chalk that up to like a coincidence, right? Like, just because I'm a referee doesn't mean my extended family or my family's not going to enjoy the game or whatever. But when it's that, like and this goes back to this entire thing, like with Scott Foster as well, when the numbers back up everything, that's not really subjective anymore, right? Like, there's like data that is pointing to that there is a problem here, whether with a specific individual or a specific, group of people. Like, it's hard to refute that just being, I just don't know. I don't know how it's not being handled in a more professional way from the NBA administration.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Paul is 72-70, so over 500 career playoff record, and Scott Foster officiated playoff games. He's 0-16 or 0-17.
It's crazy. That's crazy.
That's
to tie in the NFL too, and with what happened in the Super Bowl, I don't think it was rigged or anything like that. I'm not going to be someone that put hashtag scripted into everything, but I do think like to think about how the referees are chosen for the Super Bowl and how it's basically like an all-star team where these guys had like never worked together, or I don't think they're on like the same crew together.
No.
Where it's like, why are we just getting like 3 guys who have never worked together and being like, or however many, and just being like, you know what, do the game that matters the most. I just don't understand. I don't understand the thought process behind any of it.
Well, you would hope that all NFL crews are good and that you could take a crew and put them into the Super Bowl, like the best crew. And they frame it as a meritocracy, but reality, communication is a huge part of NFL refereeing.
Right.
And there's a bunch of different angles in every single play, and there's a lot of situations where a crew needs to get together and communicate about what the right call is, because it's very easy to miss calls. And when you throw a bunch of humans that don't really know each other into a event where 100 million people are watching and scrutinizing in real time, that things can go wrong.
It would be like, in any job, right? Like if you are producing a podcast and they're like, hey, instead of working with the team that you've worked through all year, we're just going to give you like a producer over here, a sound guy over here. And you're like, wait, what? Why would we do that? That is not an effective way to work. Makes no sense. I wanted to go back to Javi for a second too, because I loved every time he was mentioned. And it already tilts me every time ESPN cuts to him, but I just wanted to, what is your level of tilt every time Javi comes on and then doesn't really decide what the call is until the refs make the call? Or I just learned recently they have like an earpiece with like the NBA offices, right? While that's going on. Anyway, sorry. Now I'm just yelling about Javi.
No, please. No, I don't get asked about Steve Javi enough, Mike. So I'm very excited to talk about Javi. And so Rasheed Wallace, again, who I think is the most authentic referee hater out there. I'd say I think Javi's his most hated. And Javi, I think, look, now he's a deacon in the church. He's ESPN's expert referee. Give me a fucking break. Steve Javi might have been the worst and the most biased of all the referees. He was a problem. He was the problem. He was. I think it's fair to, let me choose my words wisely here. When it comes to Steve Javi, talking to a lot of black players, I think it's fair to ask whether or not Steve Javi was racist.
Yeah.
And if he hated Iverson, he hated Sheed, he hated Steve Javi hated brash black basketball players.
Yeah.
That's public. Everybody knows that. Ask any referee, ask any player about Steve Javi. ESPN having him on is another thing that's indicative of a bigger problem, of a corrupt system. It's ridiculous. And Steve Javi is a guy that I look at, especially now, using religion as a cloak to mask a lot of terrible things that he did on the court. I don't think Steve Javi was fixing games by any means.
You're right.
I don't think Steve Javi, there was a lot of referees were like the lowest level of rock star, the way they traveled, the way they fornicated. And by all accounts, Steve Javi didn't do any of that stuff. But when it comes to his on-court performance, I think Steve Javie is one of the worst referees who has ever reffed. I think it's very fair to ask about his biases and look at his record and track record when it comes to players like Allen Iverson or Rasheed Wallace and ask how big of a role that race played in the calls that he made.
Yeah. And, I listen, you can't go back and fix those things, right? You can't go back and fix calls or anything like that. Like, there's nothing you can do about him sucking then. But like, why continue, especially if this is like common knowledge amongst officials in the league, amongst players in the league? Obviously, the media would know this as well. Why continue to elevate someone like this, especially because, and like, no offense to any referees that might be in the chat today, no one gives a fuck when they cut to those. No one's like, thank God, Mike Pereira. Like, no one cares. No one gives a shit. Like even Troy Aikman doesn't. Like, none of those guys care what they have to say, I don't think, unless it's just a fight with them. I don't know. There's zero upside in being like, well, now let's cut to former referee Steve Javie. Steve, what do you think? Like, I don't understand why.
And he's still an NBA mouthpiece. He's still a company man.
Yeah.
And there's absolutely no value in Steve Javie inserting himself into our broadcast. And ESPN should be, that is where it's really interesting, where you look, the tie between the NBA and ESPN, right? They are tied at the hip. They have billions of dollars. There's billions of dollars at stake when it comes to the NBA product for both of them. So,
which is only going to continue to be highlighted over the next like year or so as they figure out the new the media deal that's coming up. And now like my tinfoil hat's going on, and I was like, are they employing Steve Javie because they're afraid Steve's going to say some stuff if he's like,
no, they're afraid. They're employing Steve Javie because they know that they can control him. Yeah, that is why ESPN employs Steve Javie, because he is a company man and because they know that he's not going to say anything that is detrimental to the league. He's going to agree with every single call. Yeah. And that's where just us as viewers, like, we have eyes, we're watching the game, we know basketball. And so when Steve Javie tells us something that tells us a block is a charge, it's tough to swallow. And it's tough for me to swallow because I'm friends with Rasheed Wallace and Bonzi Wells now. And I know the impact that he had on their career and on their lives as guys who have a code. That's what I love about Sheed and Bonzi. They both have a code. Yeah. And I think if you know them and you know their code, then you respect the hell out of them. And when it comes to the refs and why Rasheed hated the refs, again, I'm excited to bring some of this to light over the coming month, but it's really fascinating. And Steve Javie I'm happy you asked about Steve Javie, Mike.
Yeah, I really do. It tilts me every time I see him. Because again, I'm just like coming from the content side of things. And I'm like, who is this for? Like, who is this for? Oh God. Anyways, I wanted to ask one more thing too, and I can't remember if I'd like messaged you about this when I saw it or like tweeted out about it, but when the Netflix doc came out, like, cause that came out like 2 years after the podcast. I don't know why, we don't know each other, but I was like, what the hell is this? Dude, we already did this. Like, I don't need to see this on screen. Was it like, did anybody reach out to you about that, or were you involved in that at all? Or were you also mad like me?
No, I was a producer on the I was a producer on the project. I thought they did a great job. The Way brothers are the best in the game. The Untold series, the best in the game. I mean, part of the reason Donaghy eventually got desperate enough to make a podcast with me is because there was no market that existed before Netflix that would tell a story like that. Yeah. So I was humbled to be a part of it. I was a part of it. They didn't just rip the podcast. They learned from the podcast and made, I think, a really tight little, I mean, the fact that David Terry Fine, the director, and Jake Graham Felson and everybody who was really involved in that project, I thought was impressive is that they captured the essence of the story. They did it in a really concise way. That's not my style. And that's why I love podcasting, is I want to tell you every minute detail and give you every little ounce of information. But I thought they made a really good film, and I appreciate the defensiveness. But I was a part of the film and enjoyed it and thought that they did a great job. And I think the Untold series is the
Yo, they
best,
do such a good job.
the best on TV.
There was something cool about listening to the podcast first and then almost visualizing how Donahue was responding to some of these conversations that were being had. And then to like see him in those moments, I was like, oh yeah, man, this is, I can only imagine how hard it was for you. I mean, it was probably gold every time he spoke, but to be like, what of this is true?
That was the fun. And again, I think that's so much fun for an audience. And obviously the doc, getting to see Donahue and them ending on the lie.
Yeah.
I thought the end was perfect, right? Because at the end of the doc is just asking you that question: what is true, what is false? Like you've now seen Donahue visually. You've probably listened to the podcast. What do you think is true and what do you think is false? But I can say pretty confidently, we can go point by point, and I'll tell you what I think is true and what I think is false. Donahue, everything that he says about the NBA, about the conspiracy side of this story makes sense and adds up.
Yeah.
He is prone to hyperbole, so I'm not saying there aren't little nuances that might be exaggerated, but at the end of the day, I think Tim's right. I think there was a huge and still is a huge refereeing problem when it comes to basketball. When it comes to scandal, when it comes to his actions, look, the world's evolved a lot in the last 15 years. Just the way that we can scrutinize information in general and the access to information that we have compared to 2007. So what Tim did, and this is fascinating, I don't know if I've ever really talked about this. Tim worked with a PR, from my understanding is that Tim worked with a PR professional and basically had a politician, like, he had talking points, and he has never deviated from those talking points. He didn't deviate when he talked to me. He didn't deviate when he talked to Netflix. He just sticks to the talking points and doesn't change his story. I really wish he would. The way Tim's programmed, I don't think he has any desire to. But ultimately, when it comes to the scandal, when it comes to his actions, and we get into this in these bonus episodes, the Tim PR strategy. We talk about the NBA's PR strategy and how brilliant Stern was to say. I mean, Stern saved the league. If this was Bud Selig, Stern would be out, legacy ruined. NBA would have recovered, but the NBA would have just fallen off a cliff. It would have been very similar to the baseball steroid scandal as far as magnitude. And David Stern was able to make it go away.
I mean, that was some of my favorite parts of this, was like the leaking of the information before it went public and how to like control the narrative of it all. And I mean, it was crazy. And like one other thing too about Tim, I think it is kind of natural too, where he's like exposing the bigger thing, but anything that has to do with him, he's like, well, yeah, but I wasn't that bad. You know what I mean? Like it's just like shading it in a way that it was like, yeah, I'll own up to my level of things, like sort of, but it wasn't. It's the system. It was the system. Yeah,
he keeps, and that's what we talk about. Donahue continually, and he did this with the FBI. Yeah, and the FBI never really completed its investigation. I think they would have uncovered this eventually when it came to Donahue and his actions. But Donahue was brilliant when he went to the FBI early and said, "Look at the system."
Yeah,
and the FBI looked at the system, was like, "No, this can't be how it works. This is professional basketball. It can't be this bad." And they were like, "Oh my God, it's this bad." And they focused on that. They didn't focus on Tim and what he was doing. So yeah, Tim played his cards brilliantly, I thought. And it's certainly fun to look at all of it. And when it comes to professional sports, but especially the NBA, and you see that thing leaked, always think about where it came from. Always think about who had the motive to leak it.
I know, because at a much like smaller scale, like we see a lot of this with Woj and Shams, like where they get their information from and like why. And I keep thinking about the Celtics with Ime Udoka over the summer and like how that information came out. And I was like, what? Like, who's leaking this right before? Like, who does this help? And everyone was like, oh, the Celtics are doing it. I'm like, how does this help the Celtics organization? It was like, in my opinion, it was so clear it was coming from Udoka's side of things, because it's like, let's get this out here. We'll control it. It was a consensual thing, but it just shouldn't have happened at the workplace. And that's it. I was like, nobody gets suspended for a year for that. But we
still don't know that the Celtics keeping that under the fact that is an organization. And I think Danny Ainge helped build this infrastructure, because what I've heard about Danny is that he is known by players and agents as somebody who is never going to leak anything. And that's his reputation. I'm sure Brad Stevens is, my guess is based on this situation, that he's emulating Danny's strategy when it comes to the press and it comes to these types of situations. It's crazy we still don't know the details of that story. It's crazy. And that shows an organization in lockstep when it comes to keeping a secret. And I agree. I mean, there is the narrative that is out there it's interesting, but I don't think the Celtics.
No way.
Yeah, the Celtics have done it. The fact that we don't know at this point exactly what happened is a very clear sign that the Celtics did not want this blowing up and did a really good job to keep it under wraps.
Yeah. I wanted to one thing, and then I'll get you out of here. Tim, seriously, I appreciate you so much for coming on and answering strangers' DMs. Always appreciative of that. And for everyone in the chat too, just know like all of the links right there in the show notes. Go follow Tim on Twitter at TimLikeSports and go check out Whistleblower if you haven't. It's honestly, you're listening to the whole thing in like a day and a half. I like rifled through those, and the both new episodes drop on the 20th. Is that right?
That's a good question. I got to talk to Tenderfoot. I've been so busy with Underdog. I need to revisit that. We might only be dropping the first one, and then the second one drops a week later. But there will be 2 bonus episodes coming out in the next either 5 to 15 days.
All right, great. And you mentioned Underdog again. That's kind of what I wanted to end on, because I'll be honest, I didn't know you guys were doing your own content outside of like, related to best ball or to pick'ems and stuff like that. Talk to us a little bit about that, and where can people find this content?
So our content strategy, similar to yours, revolves around YouTube. We have shows right now. We're doing a show with Steve Smith Sr. That's doing extremely well. Cut to it. We got our new show with Gilbert Arenas launches, and Josiah Johnson launches next week as well. So we're going head first in NBA. I've mentioned Rasheed Wallace. We launched a show called That's What Sheed Said with Rasheed that is currently on our Underdog NBA channel. I joined Underdog last June and began to architect our content strategy really starting last fall. And now we're in a place where we're starting to launch all sorts of cool stuff. We have extremely talented people across the organization. We got Coley Mick, got Trill Withers, Tyler Johnson. We got Rob McRae, YC. We got Scoob. If you guys listen to anything in the Trill universe, we have Scheme, which Josh McCown just took the job. So Scheme is a YouTube breakdown show with Josh Norris.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so we got Josh Norris and Hayden Winks are probably best known personalities. And Josh and Hayden really helped build this before I got here. And that show is primarily best ball and fantasy football strategy, and what they build is incredible. So we got a squad over here at Underdog, and we're hoping to really make some waves this year on the content front.
That's awesome. I just dropped a link to the main Underdog fantasy channel, so go check that out in the chat. Dude, the Josiah Johnson, I think he's the best follow on the internet. He's a machine. I don't know. I would love some truth serum and be like, do you have a team? Do you have a team?
No, it's just Josiah. It's just Josiah. Josiah's got 2 kids, and what I tell Josiah is that he is the algorithm.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, he's just so unbelievably talented, and he's really, as a host, he's been hosting No Chill, and now with Gil's Arena, he's become such an incredibly, just him and Gil's dynamic is amazing. I'm very excited for that show to launch. And we hope to, on the NBA Twitter side and on the NBA YouTube side, to have a big, profound following and create something for the culture, to use a term that is overused, but I think appropriate in this case. So I appreciate that. I'll tell Josiah you said it.
Yeah. Oh my God. It's the timing that is always blows my mind. It's like 3 seconds after a play happened, he has like the perfect meme ready to go. And I'm like, that's amazing. That's just. And now anytime I come up with a bit that I think something is funny, I have to check to make sure. Like I was like, did he already do a better version of this?
He's a machine. Josiah is incredible and talented. He's about to become known. His talent right now is primarily known for his NBA Twitter prowess, but he's going to step into the limelight in a big way this year and deserve it.
Yeah, you can tell. Was the show called Buckets? I think. Did he do a show Buckets or?
Yeah. So he's got with Wave, and No Chill, and now he's. I will say, and Josiah will maybe tell you this on the side, but yes, Gil's Arena, which is our new show, that's going to be Josiah's focus. I'm stealing him away from everybody else.
Listen, good steal. That was a good steal. Dude, Tim, thank you again, dude, so much. We'll hang out here a little bit longer, but I wanted to get you out of here and be conscious of your time. Thanks for, it's the morning on a work day. So I appreciate you.
Appreciate having me. Thursday. This is the first day since Super Bowl that I've been able to take a breath. So the timing worked out well.
Yeah.
Appreciate you having me. It was great being on. And
we'll get you back when Underdog starts launching some new stuff too. Love to have you back on and plug some stuff.
Yeah, let's cross-pollinate audiences, all the NBA fans. Let's go.
I love it. All right, Tim. Thanks again, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Just a reminder too, go check out all the links. I'll drop them in one more time so you can see them in case you don't like touching stuff in the show notes. But go check out the Whistleblower. Seriously, is like, God, that podcast is so freaking good. And it was so fun to just like get sucked into that world. It also was just like for me and my age, like when that stuff was happening, it was almost like this nostalgic time that I remember everything going down. So it was a really fun listen, and I think you'll go through it pretty quickly. But yeah, shout out Tim for coming on. That was great, guys. And shout out. I know the chat seemed jacked up throughout the whole thing, especially you conspiracy theorists right there. But no, seriously, I'm so excited to get these next 2 episodes to come out, especially with Dave Bautista, the guy that was I think, or Jimmy Bautista, Dave Bautista. We'll just say Bautista. But it's gonna be good. What do you guys want to talk about? We had last night's NBA action. There was a ton of games, right? There was a ton of games that we had last night. I don't think there was anything too spicy that we need to talk about. LaMelo went ham in his game. The Rockets lost by 40. Knicks beat the Hawks. That was pretty exciting. The Lakers, LeBron and Mo Bamba, baby. LeBron and Mo, Dave Bautista's the wrestler. There it is, man. LeBron and Mo Bamba, the two-man tandem we didn't know we needed. I don't know if you guys saw some highlights from LeBron and Bamba. I would say we got to trademark this right now. LeBamba, come on. We the people said the LaMelo triple-double, 1 in 450. Dude, I was thinking about you last night when that happened. When LaMelo got his triple-double, I was like, I guarantee you he bet on this. Yeah, Mikal Bridges. We should talk about Mikal Bridges. The Nets beat the Heat last night. #Heat culture. And Bridges dropped 45 actual points. He went 45, 8, and 5 last night in that game, which was truly incredible performance from Bridges. And I think Nets fans all like feeling a little bit better, right? If you're a Nets fan right now, I don't know if Jay Blaze is in the chat, but everybody's like, hey, we're going to be okay. We got Bridges. We got Cam Johnson. Everything's going to be fine. Everything is going to be fine. I think it might be his lifetime high. I'm sure his Bridges from Nova, right? He didn't do that in Villanova. Bridges worth the 5 draft picks. I know. I wanted to go over to the NBA So Rare side of things here for a second, just to show you. I had a fun little sweat last night, but not, we didn't smash it. We didn't, we got close. Right now in the Underdog, look at this limited shout out Underdog promo code hold. But look at this team right here. So we rolled out, this is the one where you have a cap max of 60, right? We rolled out Blake Griffin, who dropped 41. Malachi Branham was like, anything you can do, I can do. Well, I guess not better, but the same. He dropped 41. Gabe Vincent with a 35. James Wiseman made his debut for Detroit. I will say, too, I wasn't sure how they were going to use Wiseman. They played him 24 minutes. And he got a little bit more run in the second half than he did in the first half. He dropped 18, and then Walker dropped 18. So right now, we are currently in 17th. Here's the thing, though. If you look at the prizes, and there's 3 games left tonight, right? If you look at the prize pool, I think only top 20 are tier 1. So I'm going to come in 21st for sure. This is 21 out of 50. We're absolutely going to finish in a tier 2, and I'll be devastated. But that was a fun one. And my limited champion actually wasn't so bad either. We had Ja was a little disappointing against Utah. I thought that matchup was so sweet for him because Utah weirdly doesn't do well with guards going to the rim. But anyways, Ja dropped 49, AD was 61, Mark Williams 38, Collins 41, and then Sabone with a 56. So that was fun as well. But those are my squads. Merkemeister was saying, is Blake has Bridges been good, but breakout? Oh no, I don't think Bridges has been breakout player of the most improved type thing. Is that what you're talking? I don't think no. Andrew's saying Bridges scored more than 20 points 13 times in 116 games. Career high there was 28. Wow. And Sean said, I've been feeling good about the trades as soon as they happen. Bridges, Johnson, DFS, and Dinwiddie are exactly the kind of players that might make a brighter future. Yeah, I wonder how many of those guys are still on the Nets. So Bridges is on one of the most team-friendly deals. Cam Johnson hasn't really been paid yet. Dorian Finney-Smith is on a really attractive deal as well. My guess is that they don't keep all of those, right? You're just not going to have that many wings. So I imagine they move some dudes around and like get some picks or maybe some more players. But yeah, I'm curious to see how they're going to handle that situation. But good for that, man. It would have been so sad if they just all of a sudden tanked because they don't have any picks, right? I think is it Houston that has their first round picks? Lotto was saying it feels like all the marketplaces are going down. Is it just for the All-Star game week or is it like that always? Lotto, I think shout out to First Mint. Their newsletter dropped a ton of So Rare NBA information. We talked a little bit last night too on Shot Tank. If you want to go check out TST, his channel, just search TST Top Shot Talk. It'll come up. I think it's got a combination of things. I think like people are getting ready for the playoffs a little bit. I think there's some concern that like everything dips in the offseason. So they're like, let me move off some stuff now. There's also, I think, people are like, when are we getting ETH rewards and stuff like that? Why is it just cards? So yeah, I think this is also part of it. Like ETH NFTs are pumping. So maybe that like people are just moving their money around a little bit. I'm not too concerned about it right now. I think we were looking at it last night and most of the stars, right? Most of the stars have stayed relatively the same price. It's just those guys that don't matter as much, those mid-range and like lower tiered guys, nobody like, those don't have the same appeal unless they're popping in a specific game week. So we're not seeing those jumps as much. But definitely something to keep an eye on. Regular was saying the Hornets fans love the LaMelo to Williams connection. Developing Eric Collins with the wingspan of a condor is so cool. Dude, Mark Williams is awesome. I watched a lot of that game last night. Again, my bags are packed on Mark Williams, both like for clout and for on So Rare. But Mark Williams is awesome, man. That dude is bouncy. He had a couple of great blocks or a great block last night. He was throwing down some dunks. LaMelo is playing out of his mind right now. LaMelo really is. LaMelo is absolutely crushing. That Hornets team, like, they suck. They're not good. They beat the Spurs, whatever. But I feel like they have the potential, depending on, somehow, man, if they land Wembanyama, and that is going to be fun. I had a friend of mine text me yesterday or a couple days ago saying he was, like, very convinced Wemby is going to be a bust because of the way he's built. But he's, like, 19 or whatever, right? So like he's got time to fill out a little bit. But are people really concerned about that with Wemby? Because I'm not seeing that at all. I think Wemby's great. I'm not really worried about him. I mean, maybe he's not going to be the best basketball player of all time, but I think he's like can't miss. Would you rather be the Hornets or the Rockets? Oh my God, the Hornets. LaMelo Ball is awesome. LaMelo Ball is really, really good. He's got the most upside out of everyone on both teams right now. Right? Like, no, you wouldn't take Jalen Green over LaMelo right now, right? I don't think anybody's doing that. So I'd rather be the Hornets. Although we should point out, like, Michael Jordan is terrible at owning a team. Like, he's really bad at it. So that is something that we should pay attention to a little bit. D Rose says the Hornets really do suck. I'm down in the South in the local team here, and I watch way too much Charlotte basketball. It's worse than the Bulls basketball. Yeah, it is. But LaMelo's fun, man. I think people are concerned because you see what happened to Chet. Yeah, I mean, like, we haven't seen what happened to Chet yet. Chet just suffered an injury. That happened to Blake Griffin, too. Blake Griffin misses rookie year. Embiid, right? Like, people get hurt. I think it's the build, though. I don't think Wemby can miss unless something weird happens. Dude is the real deal in every way. Yeah. Kenyon Martin and Şengün are better than the Hornets' third and fourth guys. Yes, they are. I agree with that, but they're also not good enough to matter. You know what I mean? So I would rather give me the upside of LaMelo, I think. Would you rather have MJ as your team's starting point guard or your team's, like 50-year-old MJ too? 50-year-old MJ? That's great. Also, I think there's some so rare. So Hamey just sent me something really funny. I think let's look at this and then we'll get out of here. I want to see if there's auctions happening right now for Luka because there's some action shots that are out there. Let's look at these action shots, baby. Yes, give me this. Look at that action shot, baby. Woohoo! Come on. Zoolander Luka right there. Zoolukander. Wow, that's great. I love this. This is hilarious, dude. Shout out. Honestly, I think So Rare did this on purpose. I think they're having fun. I love it. All right. Yeah. People are saying, yeah, THT did ball last night. It looks like Colin Sexton got hurt as well last night. So I have to pay attention to that. I'll give you a THT drop and then we're going to get out of here. Hey, just a reminder, we've got 89 Cavs tonight at 7:00. No show Friday. No shows Monday. I'll see you at the All-Star game. Dustin and I flying in tomorrow. Checking out No Dunks tomorrow night. That's going to be very exciting. We're going to have a lot of fun. But I appreciate everyone being here. Make sure you go follow Tim Livingston at Tim Like Sports on Twitter. Go check out the podcast. I really appreciate him for coming on today. Listen, I was just like geeking out. I was a fan, so I was excited to talk to him. But I hope everybody has a great weekend. If I don't see you, if you're in Salt Lake City, hit me up. We out.